저희가 집을 나선 게 새벽 5시인데 지금 8시입니다. 8시입니다. 근데 아직도 12시간의 비행이 더 남았습니다. 트리플 A 프로젝트 팀은 지난 6월 18일 이곳 미국에 도착했습니다. 중국을 경유했기 때문에 총 비행 시간은 23시간에 육박했지만 LA에 계신 많은 한인분들의 도움 속에 아주 무사히 도착할 수 있었습니다. 짐을 정리하고 자전거를 조립하며 본격적인 횡단을 준비합니다. 루트도 직접 짜보고 자전거에 문제는 없는지 바이크샵에도 들렸습니다. 쓸데없이 텐트도 미리 쳐보기도 하고 태평양에 바퀴도 담궈봅니다. 지금은 횡단을 시작한 지 2주가 넘어 어느새 중부 지역에 도착했는데요. 지금부터는 서부 지역에서 촬영한 영상들을 업로드합니다. 이 영상은 계속해서 시리즈로 제작할 예정입니다.
Have you ever heard about the comfort women?
Yes.
Yes.
About the what now?
Comfort women.
One more time. I'm not understanding.
I have vaguely through some other people, yes, but probably not as much as you guys. No.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and the word. Yeah, I'm familiar with what happened during World War II.
Not since you just told me.
Yes.
Yes, of historical World War II through, was it modern times now?
How do you know that?
I don't really remember where I don't know. It's just general knowledge, but maybe not a lot of people know. But I can't remember where I heard about it. I probably just read it somewhere.
Okay.
I read a lot of historical reading, World War II, so I've always been aware of it.
Well, a lot of it is because I live in overseas in Jordan, and our country next door to us, Saudi Arabia, has just allowed women to drive cars. And so because of that, there were other issues that came up that had to do with how women are treated and services for women and equality. So yeah, that's really how I know, because that's a big deal in Saudi Arabia that women can now drive. And so this is something that I found out in my research for women. So it's amazing you're doing this.
I believe I heard about it when I was actually in Japan, and I don't recall hearing about it when I was in Korea, but certainly when I was in Japan, I heard about that.
For me, my mom talked about comfort women, just not very deeply, but just kind of as a passive thing, like, oh, this happened, but she didn't know a lot, and she didn't talk a lot about it, and it wasn't until I got to college that I learned a lot more about like the scope and depth of the issue.
For me, it was probably when I was around like 14 or 15. I've always had like an interest in East Asian history and culture.
Okay.
So, of course, I would, after reading books about Japanese history or Korean history, it would the comfort women issue is something that would come up, and that's where I started learning more about it.
What was your first impression when you heard about this issue?
Well, it made me think of how the Nazis had used Jewish women in the concentration camps as a brothel and things like that. I mean, it sounds very similar. You know, when a dominating force or something comes into a country, they seem to use the indigenous people of that country, you know, for their own needs, whether it's slavery or something else, sexual slavery, whatever. I mean, it seems it's a common story.
Yes.
I thought of it as slavery. I am actually old enough that I remember, you know, kind of the tail end of black slavery in the United States, and it's the same thing, maybe worse. It's terrible. It's just slavery for the women.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they were kidnapped and taken and held prisoner by the Japanese, I believe.
My first impression? This is horrible.
Horrible.
I mean, that time was, of course, like a really horrible time for everyone in the world, but like such a very like organized and unorganized system for sexual slavery. It's the fact that for me, I learned around the same time that it was still denied by the Japanese government, along with many other things like the massacre in Nanjing and such. So it was like, oh my god, I thought it was it just like made me feel sick.
For me, when I first learned about it, because I was kind of young, it just kind of went into my head as, oh, that sounds like a horrible thing, but it happened a long time ago. But then I got to college and actually went to a talk with Phyllis Kim, and that's where I really learned, like, oh no, this is real history. These women are still alive. It impacted so many people and still denied by the government the involvement that they had with the abuse that these women suffered for years at the hands of for the military. And it was really shocking to learn that so many women suffered, and yet it's not talked about. At least in America, it's not talked about at all unless your family or you're interested in East Asia or your family kind of knows about it. Otherwise, it's not talked about at all. So it's very shocking.
Yes.
I mean, clearly it's a euphemism for something that was like something really horrible that was happening and comfort women, but what was happening to these women was like really, really terrible.
Yeah.
They were just being raped over and over by like soldiers of the Japanese army. And, it was pretty gruesome.
Could you tell us what the people can do to solve this problem, solve this issue?
The first thing you have to do is you have to own up to it and admit that it's a problem. And then the second thing, you can't fix anything unless you admit that it's a problem.
Right.
And then once you admit it's a problem, then you can go to phase 2, which is how do we solve the problem? And it starts with holding people accountable. And I'm a big believer that it all starts at the top. If you have good leadership that leads by example, then the people will follow suit. But if you're too busy putting blinders on and not dealing with the issue, you're never going to solve the problem.
That's pretty challenging. I think first of all, people have to admit that it's happening. If they don't admit it, there's a problem. I don't see anything happening.
But just the fact that Japan needs to, acknowledge it and express regret and apologize for these past actions, and just try to find a way to have good relations with its neighbors moving forward.
That's hard to say because you've heard of the Armenian genocide, right? And so the United States refuses to acknowledge that the Armenian genocide, well, they acknowledge it happened, but they don't address it when it comes to relations with Turkey, because Turkey, the Turkish government anyway, refuses to acknowledge the Armenian genocide. And there are many Armenians in the United States that pressure the United States to make Turkey issue a formal acknowledgement, not even an apology, but an acknowledgement that it happened. The United States wants to avoid that issue because it's too political. Turkey is an ally of the United States. You don't want to upset them, right? So it's similar in that respect. I think South Korea wants an apology from Japan, is what I'm gathering from you. But yet, if the two are allies, they don't necessarily want to rock the boat politically. So it's really hard to say, well, what's the solution to that?
I've been to Japan, and I've studied a lot about but I've studied about Japanese politics. Right now, if you just look at right now,
Yes.
it doesn't look very good because there's the current party. They're called the Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, or in Japanese Jiminto. They're very they're a coalition government, but a large part of that coalition is very nationalistic. So they don't want to acknowledge this. And if you can see, even like the upper levels, people don't want to even try. But the thing is, I think that the Japanese population is actually a lot more open-minded than what the Japanese government wants people to think.
Yes.
The main issue is that in many cases it's just like people don't know. Like if they learn about it, like not just like in passing, but look in depth, they're like, wow, the Japanese government did that. Our country did that. That's horrible. But it's very easy for people to just if as long as only the government can say that's all a lie. It's just the Koreans that are trying to make you hate your own country. But it's not really like that. And so I think that the potential for a change and acknowledgement is there. It's just like the government is going to fight it every step of the way.
I think it starts with education, because the Japanese government for so long has censored its textbooks, it's changed the museums, it's censored all of this information surrounding comfort women, and in a larger sense, like Japanese atrocities committed during the war, rape in Nanjing, the experimentations on soldiers, comfort women, all of these are hushed up and sort of pushed away so that it becomes easier for the government to push nationalistic sentiment, saying that, oh, we didn't do these things, we're all victims of the war. It's easier for them to push this narrative of being a victim, of the people not understanding what the reality is when they are not educated. So I think for like a change to happen, for a change especially within the people itself, to then create a change within the government, it starts with education and educating the people of the reality of the situation, which is the Japanese government was responsible for a lot of atrocities against women, against all these people, and they're not speaking about it because they don't want to.
Yes, right.
And so it has to start with educating everyone.
Okay.
I think just education and awareness for people, morality, and teaching people to be aware of how other people feel in their plight. I'm not sure. There will always be evil people in the world that will do that. Just hopefully there's more good people that will prevent it.
One thing I'll say is I've also taught quite a bit of German students, and it's funny, the Germans, they never hesitate to admit that they were wrong in what they did 70 years ago in the Holocaust. They admit it, they profusely apologize, and it seems like the East has not quite come to grips with this issue the way Germany has for their atrocities, and I wish them the best of luck, and I think with people like you doing what you're doing, the future's bright.
데저트 핫 스프링스 날씨 지금 여기 날씨는 39도